to the concept of an integrated managed service, where what we have here is selective sourcing, where you are able as an end user to go out and decide what parts of a managed service make sense for you and what parts don't make sense. So the focus here is a couple of things. First of all, it's a change in how you do your job in terms of changing from managing technology to managing the suppliers and relationships that says, hey, there's some things it's just not worth my time to do. What I've got to do from this point forward is just manage that function. I've got to become the manager of managers, and then I've got to just go ahead and spend my time doing, frankly, what is more cost-effective for me to do for my company. This, again, gets back to when we're talking about selective sourcing here, and we're just saying device A, device B, device C, and we're talking about the various range of services. We're talking about that what you have the ability here is to decide what you do want and what you don't want. But the addition of having the integrated device that sits on the customer premises that's a part of the managed service brings a tremendous new capability to the entire idea of having a managed service, because what that does is allow your service provider to get new features out very, very quickly. And the way we put it here allows for rapid deployment of new features and capabilities, and I'll stress again, selectively on an as-needed basis. So all of a sudden you decide that you need to roll out, taking one of the issues that was common for both, you want to look more closely at doing application performance management. Gee, maybe a good way to do that rather than building your own box might be to have your service provider deploy already an integrated access device of some form into your network, and then they can just turn on those additional capabilities as needed. So now that we know the concept, let's kind of talk about where we are today in terms of managed services.
Actually, Steve, before you do that,
yeah.
I just want to make a couple of comments. I'm going to ask Joel if he has any comments. One of the concerns I have with this, if I look at device A, device B, device C, device D, is that people that have been successful with selective sourcing don't tend to, in this case, selectively source those four devices to four different people. The amount of finger pointing, et cetera, just grows up so very dramatically. So I think people, when they're putting their strategy together, have got to be able to think about that, because your second bullet here in terms of managing suppliers and relationships, that's tough stuff. That's really, really tough stuff. So I think people have got to be very, very thoughtful in terms of how many suppliers they turn to. Now, Joe, do you have a comment on this also?
Yeah, a couple quick thoughts. From I think the first thing is, if I were to take this chart and rewrite it today, I would replace all those devices with services. And your chart kind of illustrates that from with the blue box. But in addition, the concept of what a provider is capable today is really changing. And I think that's one of the perceptions in the market that I invite your listeners to challenge. Just a few years ago, it really wasn't possible to do, I think, as you describe it, selective sourcing. If you wanted a couple of different services, it was kind of an all or nothing proposal, and you just kept stacking on boxes. Whereas today, it's actually really possible not only to get, say, unified communications and wireless and managed WAN or MPLS, all from one provider, but it's actually possible to get it all on one device. And so that's where I'd challenge that the perception hasn't really shifted as fast as the market is changing.
I think that's very, very appropriate, the comments that both of you made. And I think that one of the big differences we're seeing today is the competency of the service providers to provide these services. That, very frankly, 10 years ago, I myself might not have been so comfortable always with saying, gee, I feel sure that the service provider can provide this effectively. Today, I think we're there. So let's move on now to looking at where we are with these managed services today. Well, gee, speaking of whether we're there or not, this is, to me, a fascinating chart from our research that's going on right now. And it kind of speaks to the question of how pervasive the managed services have become, because I could argue this one of two ways. I could say, if I look at this chart, 80% of the enterprises are using some form of managed services. On the other hand, I could say, gosh, if we really look at it, of that 80% that are using some form of managed services, at this particular point, they're still mostly in-house by over half of that number. That we only have 33% that are either about half managed service providers or mostly managed service providers. So as we are looking going forward there, we're really looking at where are we going to change here. Now, we're not at a bad place where we are today looking at the prior chart, but looking at this particular chart, we're seeing significant increase here in terms of over the next few years where we're going to see managed services going. And while 50% say they don't have a major change, we already have a significant number that are using managed services, so no major change doesn't decrease that. To me, the part that's really interesting is that we have a third who are going to have some increase, and in fact we get up to 42% that are going to be increasing, with a significant increase with 20% of those folks. So I think the future of managed services is certainly moving along quickly. Now, then, of course, the question is, why are they doing this? And again, hot off the